Progressivism is a societal cancer. Oh, hi there. Welcome to the Freedom Alternative. It seems that not a week goes by without the European Union and especially the EU Court of Justice to pass another cultural Marxist judgment that is utterly devoid from reality. Hotnews.ro titles, "An electricity company placed its electric meters at a high altitude in a gypsy neighborhood. The EU Justice Court says that's ethnic discrimination, offensive and stigmatization." And goes like this. An electricity company in Bulgaria has been accused of discrimination because it raised both its panels and meters at a significant height in a gypsy neighborhood. The company argued that it has thus tried to prevent illegal branching, but the EU Justice ruled against it. The EU Court of Justice has ruled Thursday, July 16, against the Bulgarian electric company that powers the city of Dupnica in southwestern Bulgaria. The company Ches RB installed the electric meters for all the consumers in the Gizdova neighborhood, in an area in which most of the populace is gypsy. The problem is that in this neighborhood the meters were placed on the concrete pillars at a height of 6 to 7 meters. In contrast, in the rest of the neighborhoods, the same company placed the electric meters at a height of 1.70 meters, usually within the consumers' houses or on their houses' facades or on the fences surrounding their property, the Bulgarian and EU courts have noted. The whole case commenced in 2008 when a woman from the Gizdova neighborhood complained that she can't consult the electric meter and accused the company of billing her extra kilowatts. She also argued that the practice represents an ethnic discrimination. On the other hand, the company argues that it placed the meters so high in order to protect them from unauthorized interventions from the inhabitants and to avoid the degradation of the illegal branching and other similar activities. And then it goes on and on into the minutiae of the case, blah, 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 blah. Look, let's cut through the nonsense. Anyone who's seen a gypsy neighborhood in his or her life knows damn well that the Bulgarian company is absolutely in the right. And it has nothing to do with poverty. There are tons of poor neighborhoods inhabited by non-gypsies in Bulgaria where electricity theft isn't sky high, general criminality is low, and the liabilities for the utilities companies are negligible. It also has nothing to do with race, as progressives would have you believe, since there are gypsies who are as white as a Swede. But it does have everything to do with the gypsy culture. A culture that at best turns a blind eye to theft and at worst glorifies it. A culture that has no problem with child marriage, but which does tend to have problems with common decency norms, such as avoiding stockpiling your rubbish in the middle of the street. Speaking of child marriage, Bulgaria, just as any other country in the EU, is no longer allowed to make efforts to curb child marriage because, you see, since 100% of the cases occur in the gypsy community, any efforts to curb it is bound to be struck down as racist by the left-wing pricks in Brussels, for whom any minority is a god that needs to be worshipped and the decent majority is to be written off as a bunch of intolerants. And by child marriage, I don't mean it using the UNICEF definition, which defines 17-year-olds marrying 19-year-olds as victims of child marriage, which is, in my opinion, an extremist stance in and of itself. But no, when I say child marriage, I mean genuine child marriage, such as marrying 11-year-olds with 12-year-olds, a practice not foreign at all in the gypsy community. The more culturally pure and diverse the community is, the more likely it is to find 12-year-old husbands and 10 to 11-year-old wives. Sometimes the marriages can go even lower than that, and I wish I were joking or exaggerating. With this decision, the EU Court of Justice essentially says that everyone must pretend that the gypsy areas are not hellholes and that the high propensity for electricity theft simply doesn't exist. And if the company decides to just cut off the neighborhood, they'd still be accused of discrimination. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, to be fair, the decision is perfectly in line with the cultural Marxist worldview that the EU projects over the peoples of Europe. In 2007, my country was admonished for keeping a 1997 law in place, a law which stated that criminals are to be prevented from leaving the country. The parliament quickly obeyed and abolished the law, only to then have the EU whine again that we exported criminals. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's how we roll in the European Union. The problem is that this charade can't go on forever, especially not in Eastern Europe, which is slowly starting to ask the obviously legitimate question: what's the real difference between having your affairs dictated from Moscow as opposed to Brussels? If I were a dictator, I'd force all those judges to live for 1 month in a gypsy neighborhood. Let's see how they like some cultural diversity. Because they seem very happy to force the electrical company's employees to risk physical fights every time they need to read the meters and report frauds. It's easy to be an armchair inclusive ideologue from a cushy chair in Strasbourg. Not so easy when you come down to earth and face reality. But if a trip to Bulgaria is too expensive, the judges can alternatively try to live for a month in the French banlieues. It's not a lot of driving from the EU Court of Justice headquarters in Strasbourg till the nearest banlieue. Let's see how they like it there. More to the point, from a freedom perspective, a company should have the right to serve its customers or not to serve them, as it can deem fit by mutual agreement. If the customers are unhappy, they should, of course, also be free to lift a middle finger to the company and seek alternatives. What most definitely should not happen is to have a distant bureaucracy that may not even know precisely where Bulgaria is on the map, let alone the city of Dupnica or the realities on the ground, decide that you must serve an area even if the area is bound to bring losses under the terms dictated by the court. Ultimately, the rest of the Bulgarians who don't steal electricity will end up paying for the damages because the company has to recoup its losses somehow, and if the state forbids it from protecting its asset, then the losses will go into the final price for the rest of the consumers. Now, how's that for ethnic discrimination? Now, this would of course add up to the myriad of other EU-sanctioned ethnic discrimination against non-gypsies. For instance, a non-gypsy may score 90% on a college admission exam and still not be admitted, whilst a gypsy can score as low as 30% and still be admitted because of the Roma Inclusion European Initiative. Same goes in high schools, a portion of job fairs, some state positions, and many other areas of society. When we get to the brass tacks of it, the EU Court of Justice has just decided that gypsies are entitled to free electricity, provided they're willing to make a fuss about it. And mind you, the court's decision is binding for all the 28 unfortunate nations of the European Union. So don't be surprised if in the next years some other oppressed minorities, perhaps in the banlieues in France or the no-go zones in Sweden or other diverse communities, will try to pull a similar trick and then argue on this legal precedent. Don't say I didn't warn you. Anyway, don't forget to click the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter @FreedomAlternate and consider supporting this channel. Thanks for watching.